Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another recording of Hearthstone. Today is Monday, June 17th. I'm trying to get the text a little bit bigger in the chat menu window, so hopefully that worked. It's starting to feel like it's too much effort to try to get the chat to stay working for as little as it does and have all of these chat rules. But I think all these chat rules would pretty much need to stay anyways, because I certainly wouldn't want to devolve back into the way chats have been in the past when these rules didn't exist. So I'm thinking with the new blur function, maybe I just get rid of the chat itself. So I'm looking for feedback, still on the blur. I'm looking for feedback on the size of the chat font, trying to figure out how to change that, and just the chat being here in general. So enough talking about the chat. Let's re-roll this 50 gold. We need 5 victories and 3 victories with a paladin priest and 3 victories with a druid and rogue. I don't need to do all of them today, which is kind of important to point out, because there is certainly a level here of too much going on. Let's see, we are at 18. Today is the 17th. Let's try some ranked druid and maybe knock ourselves down. I don't know if I did anything between Friday and this weekend. I think I had already mentioned that I finished the Steam follow list cleanup videos. So
I must protect the wild.
because I'm done with that, I was able to finally, after like 2 weeks, be able to reload Chrome, so no more duplicate stories, which means I can already see the end of the news right now. That, combined with the fact that there was very little news that came out, since we are still in that post E3 recovery period. So there's really not a lot to talk about, and I didn't play any Doom, which is the next thing I need to play. And then I'm thinking in particular that I would want to play Zombie U, or Zombie E as it is on Steam. It was originally called Zombie U because it was a Wii U exclusive. Or maybe it was a Wii game and it was always called Zombie E. I don't know. But I've been wanting to play that game for 3 years, or if not longer, and just not gotten around to it. So I think that would be a fine game for me to cover. On top of which, right now I'm still really only lining up to a I'm really only lining up enough recordings to fill in 2 time slots for October, and I don't really want to commit to only covering 2 horror games every year. Like, I can understand 2 time slots per month for the rest of the year, but if I'm trying to squeeze the scariest of the scary games, there's other games. Like, the entire Lucas series, Lucas 1, 2, and 3. If I don't play it this year, then I've got 3 potential years in which I would have to work my way around to playing that. And so that's something I'd like to get done. There's a decent number of horror games I'd like to get done. There's a decent number of games in general I'd like to get done. Doing the follow list cleanup, though, certainly I don't think made me feel the same way that doing the wishlist cleanup did, because in all honesty, the wishlist cleanup left me with the wish list that was full of things I wanted to definitely play and cover, where doing the fall list cleanup left me with the general feeling that I just wasn't holding the fall list to high enough standards, and at least 90% of all games were removed. So the fall list is nice and clean, or relatively speaking now. But there was only a small handful, I'd say less than a dozen, games that caught my eye so well that I really wanted to play them. And I would say at least a couple of the ones that did catch my eye were games that were being recommended and they weren't even on the fall list, and then when I went and looked to see why they're not on the fall list, it's because they were already on the wish list. So I had already made the decision I would have made anyways.
I fight.
For the wild.
So, So yeah, I don't have a ton to talk about today. I cleaned up these videos, the Hearthstone videos, to be uploaded, and I have a bit of a hard drive issue, certainly, particularly when playing Doom, since those videos are going to be really big. I contemplated the prices of a NVIDIA GeForce 2070 and 2080. Ideally, I'd like to get a 2080 RTX. I don't think I can afford the extra $200 difference between buying a 2080 and a 2070. I have a 970 now. If this purchase is happening earlier than I would have liked it to happen, because of the fact that the 970 basically lied about the speed of its RAM in it, and I'm hoping that it had nothing, that the problems I've had with Resident Evil 4 or the Lego games have nothing to do with NVIDIA games whatsoever. There's some new AMD video cards, I believe, that have been relatively announced, and they're going with a higher pricing model, and they don't even have ray tracing cores in them. So they're just, you know, kind of working together to raise the price of video cards even more, and that's really ridiculous considering how expensive video cards are. So yeah, I'm thinking at $300 or $400 to get a 2070 is still too expensive, but I don't know how a way to really get around it. And a 2070 compared to a 970 would be doubling the performance. It would, as long as I'm sticking at 1080p, it should solve most issues that I would have in the next few years of just games getting particularly higher and higher quality visually, and me starting to fall down from ultra settings to good settings or normal settings. And honestly, I'm holding my standards really high here just because this is a YouTube channel. Ideally, I want the games to run at as high of a setting as possible and look as pretty as possible, because I want my videos to last as long as possible. That was a major goal of running the YouTube channel, was to create content, and I've somewhat succeeded at that in the smallest way possible. If I had 1,000 subscribers and was getting monetized, I get, like, I looked and I get about 3,000 views a week. That would not be nothing. it would, even when I only had 100 subscribers and was making only 7 cents a week, that really wasn't nothing considering that work had already been done. Ideally, you want the best of both worlds. You want to get paid at least minimum wage for every new video. So for every hour you put into making a new video, you would get at least minimum wage. Ideally, you'd like to get way more than minimum wage. Let's play casual instead. We need so many victories here. This is going to be ridiculous. And then after the first 24-48 hours of a video coming out and you get your initial bump, getting even a few pennies on it on a weekly basis is something that would add up. Part of the beauty of having 5,000 videos on your YouTube channel is that you can take a bit of a shotgun approach to monetization and have people constantly coming back to your videos and watching them and giving you a few more views. That's not really how YouTube works, but it works in a small way that way. Of course, now there's some small question whether I'd ever be allowed into the YouTube monetization partner program again, because I'm not sure how many people are actually being allowed at all. And there is I suppose a question about like, would they find something objectionable in my channel, or would they just not potentially want to monetize yet another video game channel? Yeah, and who knows, by the time I got 1,000 subscribers, they'll probably just move the goalpost again. YouTube recently has felt like a 50-50 shot. Everybody that's maintained monetization seems to be getting twice as many ads. It's like all double ads of the exact same thing, which is super annoying and really going to kill YouTube in general. But then definitely feels like half of the people that I follow, we're gonna have to disconnect here. This is not gonna connect. Yeah, like half of my channels feel like they've been either mostly demonetized or completely demonetized. That might say more about what I'm watching than anything else, but the people that are still monetized are getting double ads. So it seems like it was a direct conversion of just making the elite more elite. What? How can I be 2 cards short of this deck? And then I was playing it. That makes no sense. Seems like the servers are going bad here. Is there anything else going on? No. I watched the 3% on Netflix, season 3. You really can't watch that series right now, unfortunately. It boils down to you could have watched the first season if you didn't know that there was ever going to be a second season made, but as soon as there's a second season, that connects and continues the story of the first season in a way that I don't think they thought they were going to get a second season. And so it puts you in this weird position where if you watch the second season, you kind of know at that point that there's going to be a third season, or at least it's heavily emphasized. And now that you know there's a third season, you kind of want to watch it. And the third season in particular is a direct continuation of the second season, and it is a direct connection to a potential fourth season. So you really can't watch it right now. You're gonna have to wait until it does probably 5 seasons, if I was to guess, and that kind of sucks. I would also say the 3% being like a Brazilian or Portuguese TV show. If you watch the dub, it's not quite as good as watching it in its original language. But I watched the dub for the third season, and it's just like, okay, it's not terrible. But I really wouldn't want to spoil too much more on it. I watched Wreck-It Ralph Destroys the Internet. That's a very weird movie that goes in a lot of different directions. I'm not sure kids would like it so much, frankly. And I kind of skimmed through Wreck-It Ralph 1, and that story seemed to be, at the very least, I would say that Wreck-It Ralph 1 is a story about the character Wreck-It Ralph and his friends. I think her name's Glitch, but I don't think that. Maybe I'm wrong about that. His friend that he finds, and he makes a friend in that game in the first movie. And the second movie, it's really the exact opposite. It's a story about his friend. And very little about Wreck-It Ralph, who, frankly and honestly, they directly point out that he's not much of a character, so there's not much of a story to write about that. But even if I criticize the title of the movie, the problem is it is really just trying to be memes the movie, or internet memes the movie, without doing anything too extremely offensive. And the story jumps. Feels like it had 3 or 4 different writers on it. That's slightly a video game movie. Oh, speaking of video game things, clearly all this weekend I did was watch TV on Netflix. The History Channel put out a kind of surprisingly long 2-hour documentary on the early part of video games. That would be the Magnavox Odyssey to the PlayStation 1, and it kind of ends saying, well, the PlayStation came in and ruled the day, which we're into several generations at this point of consoles. Arguably, maybe we're only in the 3 or 4 generations of consoles, where we are on the 5th or 6th iterations of consoles, because it's kind of hard to say that a PlayStation 4 is going to be actually a generation below a PlayStation 5. But I enjoyed the movie on Netflix, talking about Atari, but they really didn't give any new information I hadn't heard before. And once they stopped talking about Atari and they started talking about Activision, which I didn't realize Activision was as old as it was, although who's to say that the Activision Blizzard that exists now has any of the people from the original Activision. And they started talking about EA, but they called it EA Sports one time, and I'm like, yeah, there was no EA Sports until about 5 or 10 years ago. So it was a fine thing going through Atari, but I think it probably lost its focus after going through Atari. To have the first hour or so talk about Atari and tell a story of how Atari got bought out by Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers basically ruined Atari, which is a short and simplified explanation, and Warner Brothers still doing damage to the video game industry with things like Batman Arkham City. But after they stopped spending an hour telling that story, and then they jumped to the NES, I'm like, okay, now you're telling too much of a story and you've lost focus, because there's a lot more details you could do to just talk about. I've seen stories and documentaries on Nintendo alone as a Nintendo fanboy, or at least former Nintendo fanboy, and you can start the most documentaries about Nintendo says after the first generation of video games failed, and Atari and other home consoles failed, Nintendo came in and saved the day and resurrected the industry, and that's kind of all you need to say to tell Nintendo's backstory, and then you can easily do 2 hours just talking about what Nintendo did. You don't need to tell an hour of Atari's story. They're pretty separate stories. Like, as far as I know, like, I don't think Nintendo had any real significant interaction with Atari. I think Nintendo made Donkey Kong for Atari, maybe Donkey Kong Jr., maybe Donkey Kong Math, maybe Popeye for the Atari, but that was it. Nintendo just made a little bit of software cartridges for the Atari when the Atari was selling well, and then Atari basically went out of business, and then a couple of years nothing happened, and then in a couple of years the NES was released in '85 in the United States, although the Famicom came out in '83.
I will fight with honor.
And yeah, so the only thing you could really say is that Atari created a high passion for video game consoles in Japan that had yet to fail, which promoted Nintendo to make the Famicom, and the major success of the Famicom led to the NES getting released back into the United States, where consoles had already failed. But then, after that, this documentary, and I don't know the name of it, so sorry about that, but it was brand new and it came out on the History Channel yesterday. But after they talk about Nintendo, then they start talking about Sega. And I'm like, okay, well, now you've covered 3 separate companies that each deserve their own story. This could have easily been a trilogy of 3 1-hour long or 2 hour long shows, instead of having it be just 1 2 hour long show. And so they talk about Sega and like Sega's aggressive stance, and then they mentioned Mortal Kombat, and Mortal Kombat was relevant. Mortal Kombat 1 is relevant. Mortal Kombat 11, not really. And let's see. And after that, at the very end, they talk about the announcement of the Sony PlayStation, and then they really don't go into any details about the Sony PlayStation either. which, if you were really just gonna go in this haphazard movement and just talk about each video game that had a significant influence, you could easily have covered all of the PlayStation 1 era, all of the PlayStation 2 era. There's enough to say there. You could have easily talked about the Xbox coming out, and frankly, it's been long enough now that you could talk about the release of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 too. The only ones that it would not be kind of fair to talk about would be the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And frankly, you could talk about something that happens every year as you get closer to the reality of things. And at some point you should put in Steam, and at some point you should talk about PC gaming and Microsoft. So, for the first section of the story, I was probably more happy with that part of the story than the second section.
Join or die.
But I suppose enough stalling, because I really don't have a ton of news. Let's just shoot for a shorter experience today, and I did start doing some Lego that I haven't finished. A big Lego, the Parisian restaurant set. There's 2 of the expert creator sets, which are big 3-story building sets that take up an entire base plate, usually in size. And there's 2 of them that are so old that they're like 3 times as expensive to buy, and one is the town hall, and the other is the detectives quarters. Maybe I do have the detectives quarters, actually, come to think of it. I'm gonna have to investigate that. I have a whole system, so I need to look quickly. But I know I definitely don't have the town hall, and there was I didn't get into Lego until a few years ago, so I missed several things I would have liked to get, but otherwise I mostly have what I want, which is a nice feeling, although it's a pocketbook emptying feeling too, as far as finances go. And certainly the silliness is not lost on me that here I am, a grown adult playing with Legos when I didn't even play with Legos when I was a kid, so I have very little excuse. But yeah, if I have a shorter experience today, that would be fine. So, ScumVM put out a announcement. They're looking for people to bug chase based on their new emulation of Blade Runner, which I don't recall Blade Runner as a game existing, so must have been kind of niche, and that it's probably not a actual ScumVM game, because all the Scum games that were actually used with the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion have long since been close to 100%, if not 100%, compatible and complete, and ScumVM has just branched off to be a generic DOS emulator and old game emulator. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article here. A game called Tales of Grace's Anniversary Party, set for November 24th. Since we're looking at anime girls here, and who, like all anime girls, tend to look short and younger, or just not proportioned equally to what a real human would look like. There was a reset era, apparently, hoo-ha, for lack of a better, brouhaha, for lack of a better term. Apparently, somebody was banned and they got mad, and then they found this Discord where people were discussing lolly art, lolly art, characters that look particularly young in anime style, that yes, sometimes are used to draw lewd sexualized images of those characters. This is an issue I've said many times. It's like, in fiction it doesn't matter to me one bit. Like, a picture is as old as it's been drawn. If the picture was drawn yesterday, the character in that picture is 1 day old. It has nothing to do with reality. If there are people with you know, pedophilic tendencies and they're looking at cartoons, better that they look at cartoons than real kids, and like, get rid of the real imagery, get rid of the thing that causes real victimization and real trouble. I would argue also there's probably not as much overlap as you would think of actual offenders and people who watch anime of any kind, because, you know, all those priests and Boy Scout leaders that have been caught, which you hear story and story after that in the United States, at least, like, oh well, around the world, frankly, not just the United States. They don't strike me as people who are watching or even know what lolly anime art is. There is a big argument, particularly in Catholicism, that if the priests were allowed to marry, at the very least, then they could relieve some of their sexual urges and tensions on consenting wives, potentially. I don't know how much of that is true, but it is certainly something worth a try. There really doesn't seem to be a good reason to not allow priests to get married. And that was something that was part of the Protestant movement when they first broke away from the Catholic Church. So hundreds of years ago they were saying that. As for the reset era thing, it seems like
I'll never tell.
Seems like it's really the person who was kicked for other reasons may have modified the images to imply and kind of slander other users, and then Reset Era themselves is now apparently just deleting and blocklisting anybody that asks any questions about what's going on. This is inherently the exact same, I don't know if you want to call this cancel culture, but the exact same shenanigans that happened with NeoGAF, the predecessor to Reset Era. I don't know why anybody thinks they need to go to a video game forum or board nowadays anymore, and that includes Reddit. But yeah, this might be the end of Reset Era, which would probably be a good thing, because Reset Era was founded in, I think, a bad reason to start a forum board, which is that they're just going to be this SJW forum board, and now, as all SJWs eventually boil down to, they've just become fascist, for lack of a better term, which is something they claim to be against. Like, if I was going to join a board, it would probably be something that claims to be free speech, but even in that instance, so many boards have said they claim to be free speech, and then they found they really aren't for free speech. Sid Alpha covered the story with a little bit more detail, but he also colored the story because he's just like completely against lowly art, and he's just like, well, if you're looking at anime girls that might look a little underage, you're immediately a pedophile, and pedophiles should just go shoot themselves in the head, which is not really a solution to the problem. This is not what psychologists would recommend. I know it's pedophiles who act on their urges and actually claim victims are morally repugnant to all, but we treat them frankly worse than we treat murderers, and I've actually heard people argue that they are worse than murderers, and that's not a fair and logical way to deal with a criminal element, or in this case, mentally ill element. They should be treated like mentally ill people, and they should be helped to recover and cure from it. But yeah, so many people take such a hardline stance against pedophiles and sex offenders in general that they are forced underground to create what I assume is a much larger hidden underground industry than there really should be. Yeah, and that's not really solving anything. And certainly there's more arguments to be made about changing beliefs and understandings of the age of consent in the world whatsoever, because that age of consent was like 12. Like, if you believe in bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, that's 12 and 13 that you're being considered an adult. That's old enough to have a wife. That's old enough to have kids, or at least kind of pretend like you're going to. But yeah, we've pushed that age to 18 for most people. I wouldn't even be surprised if it starts getting pushed even further, 19, 20. The argument is that your brain is not fully developed until you're in your mid-30s. Wouldn't it be crazy if everybody below the age of 35 was considered a child still? And the line between the child and adult physically is pretty different, but mentally is pretty much the same these days. When you're talking a selfish 20-year-old versus a selfish 30-year-old versus a selfish 16-year-old, there's not too much mentally different there as far as level of maturity. Moving on though, we have TechRaptor has an article here. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a fresh take on the whole series. I don't know why this would be a fresh take, because I would have assumed it was just a collection of the old games. But apparently, The Skywalker Saga isn't simply a new game tacked onto a collection of old games. No, every Star Wars movie has been overhauled for The Skywalker Saga. Interesting. That means previous games have been overhauled completely for this new way to experience Lego Star Wars. It's not simply running from level to level, it's running around the worlds of Star Wars to locations we know. Walnut confirmed the cutscenes have likely had a facelift too. the amount of things that might be different is going to be really interesting. Because if the levels are mostly the same, then there's not a great reason to buy it again. But if they've remade each level yet again, which some of these levels definitely have been made 2 or 3 times already, that would be crazy. Speaking of crazy, we're not getting any victories today. It's just nothing. I can already tell this is going to be a long day of... Let's just try Priest. This is going to be a long day of trying to get victories. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article, Iseshima Mystery Guide, the False Black Pro for the PS4 launches June 20th. This looks like an extremely old game. Let's see.
Anduin versus Garrosh.
There's no indication that this game actually came out, though, in Famicom era, even though it's being called a Famicom style game. And this is your one screenshot you're getting. Wow. It's selling for 1,000 yen, which is about $10. And that's kind of a great indication of how little news has come out. I am slightly questioning maybe I'm seeing less announcements on what's on Steam, but I might also be curating that a little bit better, probably at this point to my own mistake, but frankly it's kind of a balancing act, I guess, at this point. Do I want to cover everything after E3 so I have more garbage to talk about, or do I want to maintain the standards a little bit higher and only talk about games that are actually worth mentioning? Because there certainly is a level of quality games where, like, there's no argument that it is clearly a low effort game. And I've been kind of wishy-washy on that point too, because I've sometimes patted myself on the back for saying, oh, I'm covering almost every game, or I'm covering every game. Now I'm kind of doing the opposite and saying now I'm curating what's being talked about.
Right away.
Okay. Gamatsu has an article here. Gungrave Gore introduces Shin Quartz Angel, which is a character. Gungrave Gore comes out for the PS4 in December. That's all the bits of information we have here. Yeah, of course, there's not going to be any announcements. Alright.
Right away.
Should have played this, then I could have silenced them and made a copy of them. I played both of these. Alright, let's see how this works.
Do you like to play with fire?
Alright.
Neither snow, nor rain, nor witch.
Let's see. Alright, well, so let's make a copy of it. this, and then do that, and then do that. Gamma Sutra has an article here, it's a video, how the indie apocalypse changed the shape of indie success. What's weird here, this is a GDC talk, and Gamma Sutra's parent company that runs GDC. What's weird here though is I've not heard this phrase indie apocalypse at all, so I don't know when this happened, or when they think this happened, but I kind of have to disagree with it in general. They're saying between 2014 and 2018 there was an indie apocalypse. If anything, I would argue what probably happened is there was a significant let's see, what's this? There's probably a significant upturn of indie game success in that time, particularly like things like Binding of Isaac and such, that made it seem like indies were more likely to be successful than they really ever were likely to be successful. There still was clearly a ton of indie garbage that was being made. Now, Steam Greenlight and Steam Direct certainly had something to do with that, but itch.io always existed. Flash games always existed. There's been ridiculous garbage games for a long period of time. So I can't really believe that there actually was an indie apocalypse and such. If anything, there was probably just a correction of the market that needed to happen. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Gwent expansion for Novigrad launches June 28th. I think Gwent is pretty much dead at this point. Like, I probably could play through the single player expansion and play Gwent fine, but it's certainly not going to repeat or replace Hearthstone. Speaking of card games though, seems like Twitch is intent on actually suing all the people who did the artifact troll streaming, where they were putting up porn and like copyrighted movies and just things like that on the Artifact channel for that weekend, and apparently they were using bots to promote those videos so that they got more visibility. Yeah, they're basically going to try and sue everybody and anybody. They're going to try and get Discord people and Facebook groups and anything that would have been used to coordinate this trolling action. This is definitely a dangerous thing for Amazon to do, because it's very, very easy for Jeff Bezos to be labeled as the person who sued a bunch of 12-year-olds, and it's certainly not something that you would want to make as well known as it is now, that they're suing people. This is something you would want to hire a third-party law firm to handle, and the idea of coming out and making it really obvious that no, we're just suing these people, it could backfire. It definitely could backfire if it turns out all these people are a bunch of 14-year-olds, for instance. But I guess we'll probably hear more about that later. see. Next we have a game on Steam called Zack-alike from Zachtronics. Apparently this is a book just kind of talking about all these Zachtronics games that they've made, like Magnum Opus and such. It's a free thing, so I guess I could put this on the wish list. Although, it seems like maybe there's a bit of game demos in this also. This is a nice release from Zachtronics in particular because it allows them to keep their name out there. Although weird you'd put it out just a week after E3, like Magnum Opus, for instance, though. Opus Magnum, actually. Man, I've been misnaming that. Came out in 2017, and Exapunks came out in 2018, so it gives them, I guess, something to have released this year. But not really anything that I would need to look at unless I'm covering a series of Zachtronics games, which I'd like to cover them. I just don't think I own any of them at the moment.
Whispers everywhere.
Is someone injured?
Let's see. Next game we have to consider is Golden Treasure: The Great Green, which looks like an adventure game, for lack of a better term. Looks very text-based. You might call this a visual novel at this point because it doesn't look like there's a really great game here. This is $17.99. This in no way looks like a game that is worth $17.99, and it's English only. So of course that's not making it to the fall list. Next game we have to consider is a game called Chalk and Sausage, Walk the Plank. I guess this is maybe Chalk and Sausage, or maybe that's supposed to even be pronounced Cook and Sausage. It's a point-and-click adventure game. I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games, so this looks good enough to put on the follow list. At least $8.99 discounted, English only. No full audio, that sucks, but it seems to be the state we're in still with point-and-click adventure games. Alright. So we got 3 victories here. Next thing we'd have to do is figure out how to win with Druid or Rogue. Alright, let's try Rogue. This story, by the title alone, is jaw-dropping. Minecraft Story Mode episodes go on sale for $100 each. Now, in Season 1, there was like 8 episodes alone. And several of the episodes had like Captain Sparkles in them. And the last 3 were like not connected. If you head over to the Xbox 360's digital storefront right now, and you'll see something intriguing. Minecraft Story Mode episodes are each listed at $99.99. There's a reason. Per a post on the Minecraft Story Facebook, the episodes are being listed at that price specifically to deter visitors from paying for them ahead of the game's delisting and future inability to download at all on June 25th. There is a better way to do that, frankly. There's definitely a better way to do that. And frankly, if you're going to set them for an unreasonably high price,
Job's done.
you should put them at $9,999.99, a amount that would get red flagged by almost every credit card and not be allowed by almost every credit limit. In fact, you should set the price for $999,999.99, because then that amount would clearly be flagged by any bank and not allowed. Like, there's only probably a handful of rich Saudi princes that could afford to buy those. The idea that you've set it at $100 is still setting it in a way that you're hoping a few people will fall for it and buy it. Meanwhile, my interest in covering Minecraft Story Mode Season 2 is pretty much at zero until there's a new place in which that game can be purchased and played. I don't really see a reason.
Justice is mine.
Job's done.
Yeah, I really don't see a reason to try and play those games and cover them until all the Telltale stuff has been corrected. Alright. See. Next game we have on Steam is Duck Season PC, which I could have sworn Duck Season has been out already. See, this is somebody who played Duck Hunt and then it turned into a horror game at the end. So I don't know if this is what in the world this game is. It's a horror game where the Duck Hunt dog, I guess, chases after you. Yeah, frankly, when I was first looking at this, I would have been perfectly fine just playing a 3D version of Duck Hunt, because that looked perfectly fine by my point. But to turn it into a horror game was weird. I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but frankly, I'm not super sold on this game. And I feel like it's been in early access for a while. Yeah.
Justice is mine.
I'm not sure I want to play a horror game. I would hope that there's a mode where I could just play the duck hunting part and be happy with that. On the other hand, if you were just to make a duck hunt clone, Nintendo very possibly would sue them, although there's still a great reason for Nintendo to sue them. It would be pretty boring. It really wouldn't be much of a game. And you still run into the problem of a mouse or a controller controlling a gun. Because there's definitely no zappers connected to most people's PCs. Next game we have to consider is Summertime Sports Games, which looks like it's a combination of Olympic-style sports. I think I was saying just a week ago that probably when you make games like this, you're not doing a great job with any of the individual sports. That being said, javelin and weightlifting and track and things aren't interesting enough sports to be alone. So this looks interesting enough. I'll put it on the fall list. 20% off for $15.99. Possibly way too expensive for what it is, and definitely trying to get some play in the middle of the
this guy's toast.
Olympics being on the verge of coming out. The 2020 Olympics happening eventually. Let's see. Next we have a game to consider called Sophie's Dice. It seems like it's just a dice rolling low effort asset flip game. Yeah, I don't know how you could really make a game that's just around dice rolling. Frankly, if you're gonna do that, why even make it on Steam? Why not put it on a cell phone where it'd be a lot more useful and portable? It's such a simple concept. They seem to be spicing it up a little bit by letting you change the size and shape of dices, but unless they're emulating the physics really, really well, which you could probably do by default just in Unity or Unreal engine, and yeah, this really is just a low effort Unity or Unreal engine demo. They want $4.24 discounted for this game, and really can't justify that price at all.
Justice is mine.
And we really don't have a lot of news. So, Game & Sutra has an article here. Nintendo has promoted the Legend of Zelda producer Yeti Aonuma. Aonuma, maybe. They've quietly produced it, apparently, some of their longest serving producers, including the Legend of Zelda overseer. I assume what this really is a case is that I assume a lot of people that work at Nintendo have been working there basically their entire life and not been able to get any kind of promotions because there's no new position to promote them into. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is Nintendo, which is an old school Japanese company, is adopting kind of a more Western style of promoting people by giving them a new title without any new duties or any new like authority or anything. Yeah, if you're upwardly mobile, I would definitely not think about working at Nintendo. Although if you're upwardly mobile in your career, I don't know where you would want to work because you're probably pretty much screwed regardless. The way that you mostly get promotions or bigger, better positions is by jumping from company to company, which is something a Nintendo employee wouldn't and probably shouldn't do, particularly a Japanese employee. Or you stay within a company and then you prove your commitment to being trapped and working with that company forever by getting more and more in debt with higher and higher levels of education, which in the video game industry in particular, I'm not sure you really need that anyways. Let's go ahead and hit this.
Job's done.
Yeah. But it's nice to hear somebody got their due and got promoted. Oh, I don't know if I have this story open or not, but Rooster Teeth was a bit in the news. Some of the Rooster Teeth employees, which I didn't get any true facts here, so apologies if this is vague, but they came out and they alleged that nearly a third of the entirety of Ruby, a season of Ruby, or their other show Gunlock, is done for free because Rooster Teeth has so much crunch and so much overtime that's being done and not being paid for. And this was on Reddit, and they were talking about just like how easy it is in the United States to force people to work to overtime or not pay them for overtime or force people into salaried positions. Inherently, the salaried positions that don't get overtime argument just is a facetious argument that's best solved by saying, you know what, salaried employees should get overtime too. Everybody should get overtime. At that point, it solves the whole problem. Let's see. I'm doing this all wrong.
Job done.
Yeah, you could solve a lot of problems by just forcing overtime for everybody, even if you're getting paid a fixed salary. I think you'd quickly start to see people get knocked off salaried positions, and then they would realize, oh, your salaried position really was only paying you $15, maybe $18 an hour, and you weren't getting paid as much as you may have thought you were getting paid anyways. What's the other? Druid? Well, let's just keep it interesting. Let's just swap over to the European account while we're here, because we're gonna be done, and I'm just gonna have to play a ton off screen. Meanwhile, we have a game on Steam, Mystery Solitaire, Grim Tales. Wanted to point out, yes, these solitaire games do occasionally still get made.
Come on in. Spend an evening.
I kind of like the art style here of the Hansel and Gretel, but that's kind of the only image they even have to show. Everything else is about the game. This is discounted 40% off for $2.99. English, French, German, and Russian, which is for Grim Fairy Tales is a decent collection of languages that you'd want to support. Let's re-roll this. So then now Hunter and Mage and Shaman class cards. Seems like we're kind of going all over the place with daily quests. Let's see, next we have a game on Steam called Astonishing Baseball 2019, which looks like a baseball management sim, and it is far from astonishing. Like, this looks really, really boring.
Rexa versus Gerash.
Victory or death!
Let the hunt begin.
Yeah, it seems to be just a baseball fantasy thing. I don't know how many people in the United States even do a baseball fantasy. I know fantasy football is popular, but I've never heard anybody mention anything about a fantasy baseball team. It's 30% off for $6.99. English only, third party EULA for no reason. Yeah. Let's see. This one, this one, this one, and that one. Let's just re-roll everything. TechRaptor has an article here. The Last of Us Part 2 looks to launch for PlayStation 4 in February of 2020. I think this a release date was kind of released or leaked. Okay, so if Last of Us 2 is coming out February 2020, doesn't that mean that there's been some new shift for well, it's coming out for the PlayStation 4, it says, in February of 2020. I start to wonder if perhaps this is actually more of a case of the PlayStation 5 might come out in February of 2020. Now, that wouldn't mean it really came out in February 2020. It would mean that it's coming out for holiday 2019, and they've sped up the release of it. There's a slightly unfair characterization I heard about Project Scarlet, how it was just a Me Too announcement saying, yes, we're going to have a bunch of great features too, but we're not going to talk about price or anything like that. That's, I think, slightly unfair. Yeah, I don't think you really can say that Project Scarlet didn't put out some real numbers. There were real numbers there, and as much as the PlayStation 5 put out real numbers, and so both of them clearly are somewhat locked in on the hardware specs, but they're probably not locked in on actual the chips or the hardware that will be used in. There can be a big difference between saying a game console is going to have 16 gigabytes of GDR6 RAM and knowing exactly who the producer of that RAM is always going to be, if it's not multiple suppliers and producers, and how fast you're going to overclock or underclock that RAM, which my guess is there's a decent chance it would be underclocked. At least some of it would be, so that there was an average speed that happened. Oh, that was one story that I did hear and I hadn't heard before. Apparently, Steve Jobs at Apple, I was just thinking about Apple because they had two different modems and they slowed down the one style of modem to run at the same speed as the other style of modem. They slowed down, I believe, Motorola modems to run at the same speed as Intel modems for 4G. But yeah, apparently Steve Jobs was hired to make the game Breakout for the Atari, and Steve Wozniak, who is a sort of friend of Steve Jobs, although he wasn't treated very nicely by Steve Jobs, and frankly that's true for I think any of Steve Jobs' friends. He didn't treat anybody very well. So anyways, they were given the task. Steve Jobs said, I want a job, and he was given the task to make the game Breakout. He made the game Breakout. Atari paid Steve Jobs, who was the actual employee of Atari, a $5,000 sign-in budget, and Steve Jobs apparently told Steve Wozniak he got a $500 sign-on bonus and gave $250 of it to Steve Wozniak. So he screwed his friend out of like $2,250 back in the 70s. So that number certainly would have been a significantly more, well, it's a big amount of money even now, but it would have been a lot more in the 70s. And apparently this isn't the first time he had done something like that to Wozniak. Steve Jobs is also notorious for denying his daughter which I think pretty much everybody agrees is his daughter. He basically denied that she existed and wouldn't ever admit it.
Defend the gates.
And I guess he had dated or slept with someone and they weren't really ever a couple. But yeah. But the idea that Steve Jobs had made a video game for Atari had not occurred to me. Also, apparently Jack Black, the actor, was in one of the first commercials he did was a commercial for Pitfall Harry. The game, was it just called Adventure? Or was it Adventure with Pitfall Harry? Or, so there's a couple of some Atari stories of interest there, but not really big news. Moving on, Koch Media put out a tweet as a publisher of games. Apparently, Leisure Suit Larry: Wet Dreams Don't Dry is launching on the PS4 and Switch this Wednesday. It's really weird right now to see Leisure Suit Larry game come out on the Nintendo Switch and the PS4, and then wonder if maybe the PS4 version is censored. Speaking of PlayStation 4 censorship, it is also worth mentioning that one of the games on the PS4, one of the visual novel games, had a completely uncensored image that slipped by. I would quote unquote accidentally say it was accidentally slipped by the censors at PlayStation, and then they had to rush to have it removed. But yeah, there was some nudity that was at the very end of the credits, or in the middle of the credits, at the end of the game. So I also wouldn't be surprised if people simply did not play the game all the way through. I would say more and more for games, if you want a game licensed on a console and the console cares about censoring anything, you would pretty much demand the final art of, like, all 3D models, all final art, all sound effects, and you would just want to be able to flip through all of that, and that would take a lot of time. So I don't think any of the companies actually do that. I think they heavily just say, you describe what is in your game and we will trust you that you're telling us the truth, under penalty of lawsuit, and we'll just tell you what we have a problem with.
Victory or death! Let the hunt begin.
TechRaptor has kind of a joke article here. Animal Crossing New Horizons autosave feature will leave Mr. Resetti jobless. Apparently, Mr. Resetti is the person who would he would yell at you when you reset the game without saving. So, you know, okay. It's a joke. It's really just an article talking about how Animal Crossing will have a new autosave feature. Although I think Animal Crossing also has a problem where the island is the same regardless of what profile you're logged into on the Switch. So maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I guess it really depends on how you want to play Animal Crossing New Horizons. It's probably supposed to be a good thing. I could see how it could be a good thing where multiple profiles of multiple kids are all on the same island and interacting with each other. But I could also see it be a terrible thing if one kid decides to troll the other kid, or one kid decides to troll the parents' Animal Crossing experience. Alright, let's do this. Next, we have a game on Steam called Virtual Hero VR. This looks exactly like a stand in one place and just throw things VR game. It is slightly more polished than I think what you normally would see.
Access denied.
And then there's this game that's being implied but not shown. Let's see. I heavily suspect what's going to happen here is that there will be a re-release, a major update to Steam when the Steam Summer Sale happens. This is a free game, but I have no interest in it. So, if you have VR, check out Virtual Hero VR. But yeah, it looks like it's a demo and nothing special. There we go. Let's see.
Somebody order a bomb.
Moving on, we have a game called Aozora Undergirls Karasome Irony. I believe this is just going to be a virtual pop group. Maybe there's actually a pop group that these characters represent. But it's basically Beat Saber with anime girls dancing on the stage. But as you can see, it's rather busy on the screen. So you're having to do a lot. So you can't even really zoom in and look at the performance. And it doesn't seem like there's any instance in which you can see the performance at all. So you're getting an experience of being in the audience of a real performance, while also playing some kind of weird virtual reality or augmented reality game. This is requires VR, and it's 99 cents. It feels like a lot of these games are specifically being designed to sell games, like sell the concept of a, not sell games, but sell the songs themselves. So we might start to see a trend of Japanese J-pop, not K-pop, but we might start seeing a trend of K-pop too, coming to Steam in virtual reality simulations like this that are going to all be extremely similar. And it's really just to get you to listen to the music and possibly purchase the music, which is not likely to ever happen. I don't think the video game or the music industry, in this case, I'm so used to saying video game industry, I don't think the music industry is going to come out and be a success again, ever. Next game we have to consider is one called Gratuitous Animal Massacre, which is just a low effort Unity asset flip that doesn't really deserve any time. It's 99 cents in English only. So yeah, still getting a lot of low effort games. Okay. This. And that. And that. And then that.
Job's done.
Next game we have on Steam to consider is a game called Chainsaw, and then it has a thumbnail of what would be a buzzsaw, not a chainsaw. So they seem not to even understand the basics of what a saw something. This looks like an extremely low effort horror game with dark screenshot syndrome on top of that. It's 25% off for $2.99, supports a bunch of languages, but it's full audio Russian, so you kind of know it's a low effort Russian game. Let's see. And hit that with that. There we go. Next game we have to consider is called Retro War 8-Bit Party Battle, which looks like it's a text-only garbage low-effort game. These images don't want to load. I can't really claim that I'm out of RAM. I finally recovered all my RAM, and it really did jump from like 50% RAM down to 25%, 20% RAM, which does go to show Chrome still uses a ton of RAM. This game is 30% off for $6.99, and yeah, it's English only. It's not making it to the ball list. Alright. That. And that. And that. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is a bunch of Asian words, and then it says Love Date. This is obviously another one of these low-effort Chinese visual novels. Although a live-action visual novel, I guess is the proper term to say for something like this, seems like it might be something that could actually sell. Although it gets into a kind of catch-22 situation. English is not supported on this game. It's 20% off for $1.59, and it's only Chinese in the language. It's a catch-22 because you've got then the uncanny valley that you need to deal with, where the graphics and the imagery has to be top-notch. You basically have to do an 8K photo or more, frankly. If you're talking images, still images, you should be doing something between 12 and 25 megapixel images, like pro photography stuff that you would probably also sell in some kind of art book or a calendar or something else like that. You'd have a professional photographer just take these photos, possibly even sell them as a licensed package online for multiple games to use. But then it gets into the uncanny valley and the catch-22 of why not just do video? Why not just do a full live-action video game? Let's see. I'm gonna play this and just that for now. Yeah. And if you are gonna do video, then you're making a full motion video game. And in all honesty, people haven't really realized that full motion video games are pretty much just visual novels with less of the talk being in text and more of the talk being in spoken dialogue. And you could even argue that something like an adventure game and a point-and-click adventure game is just taking one more step away from a full-motion video game, and it starts to reduce the dialogue and focus more on the adventure and the puzzle part. And, but that at that point you've you've changed the game significantly enough to not say that they're very similar at all. Moving on, we have Gamatsu tweeted out their Anime Expo 2019 experience that are scheduled. Anime I can't pronounce anime today. Anime Expo is happening July 4th to July 7th. Let's see. They're going to, on Wednesday the 3rd pre-show, the JAS USA has some new and upcoming titles. And then I guess I'll just read this and see what else is of importance to mention. Here. July 4th, Get Down with the Get Down. Idea Factory has an international marketing presentation, and then there's visual novels with Sakai Project, and then there's Crunchyroll Games Industry panel. I don't know what Crunchyroll games are. They must be mobile games, because I don't think I've seen anything from Crunchyroll on Steam. Maybe I have, but it's only like one thing, and that's why I'm not thinking about it. Then July 5th, NIS America has a community panel on Red Moon Day, which apparently has something to do with Disgaea.
That was a mistake.
Red Moon Day celebration of some sort.
Well played.
After that presentation on July 5th is an Azure Lane behind the scenes. Azure Lane being the mobile game of anime girls who are representing battleships. After that, Level 5 presents Inazuma 11, Ares, and more. That's, I believe, the soccer game. After that is Axis Games panel of Global Domination. These titles are crazy. I don't know what Axis is. AKSYS Games. I've never heard of it before. After that is a Japanese game creativity with new game from CyberConnect 2. After that is Play Anime with Bandai Namco. Bandai Namco has some good games, I think, but then they also have some bad games. Then Saturday, July 6th is a panel called The Future of Digimon. And my guess here is Gamatsu has only listed the panels here that might have some announcement to video games and not all the panels. Otherwise, I'm totally wrong. I'm going to move over to the Asian account so we just show a little bit of play from each account today. After the Future of Digimon panel, there's a new game premiere by a former CTO, the former CTO of Square Enix. So,
Come on in.
like, who knows what that is. After that is a Neon Tide, a panel called Neon Tide, a cyberpunk visual novel. After that is Dive into the World of Grand Blue Fantasy. And then Sunday the 7th is a look into the Otome game localization process. So this is kind of what I was expecting to see, and I think we'll start seeing as a consistent thing as long as E3 is a consistent thing, which there's a decent chance it will stay a consistent thing. I guess I have to play Hunter to play Beast, or I can play Warrior and try to get things done. But yes, I do suspect we will be seeing Anime Expo become more half video games and half anime to try to grow itself. And I wouldn't be surprised if Anime Expo even tries to push into comic books, Western comic books. I'm sure Anime Expo is already somewhat heavy into manga, highlighting and Japanese light novels highlighting. But it may not be a bad thing either, though. A little competition against E3 might cause E3 to try to do something to improve its situation. Although I don't know what E3 can really do. The whole concept on the face of it seems flawed. Having this big convention show to talk about a bunch of games just kind of makes this mushy soup of games instead of having smaller shows that highlight only a few games. So my suggestion to fix E3 would be to kick out the small time game publishers and have only small things, or go full indie only and kick out the big time publishers. And that might happen on itself, quite frankly, if EA and Ubisoft and Microsoft and just like all the big time publishers left E3 and did their own thing, then E3 by default would become this indie focused show, which maybe that'll work, maybe that wouldn't, I don't know. I still think the idea kind of falls apart. Like, we don't need that. And you really don't see that too much. The Cannes Film Festival is kind of like that, but not really. But trailers for big mainstream movies don't get shown all in one week at some convention show. They get talked about at the Oscars, though. So the better move, I think, would be for E3 to host a major Oscars-like event and highlight the games that came out in the year previous, instead of always being a trade show event and forward-looking. Like, I think you could maybe find a middle ground there, and have a best of show 2019 cover games that were announced in 2018 that may have already come out. We can do this, and we can do this. We can do that. And we can play this.
What fools these mortals are!
There we go. Moving on, Gematsu has an article here. Nico Para Volume 3 for the PlayStation 4 and Switch launches June 27th. Again, anime girls with big busts, anime cat girls. So maybe censored on the PlayStation 4. I'm a little sad that there hasn't been any real follow-up on the Manga Gamer series. I saw somebody report on it and kind of not even have any kind of critical judgment or look at the video themselves and make their own judgment. So they totally took it from the perspective that Manga Gamer was being 100% honest, and they really weren't being 100% honest as far as I can tell. Nika Para, by the way, on Steam is tagged sexual content and nudity, so I expect it would be censored on the PlayStation 4. Some speculation and questioning about whether the Death Stranding game will get censored, or how badly it will get censored.
done.
I guess what I assume is going to happen, and this seems to be in line with generally how Valve acts, is they don't say anything publicly, usually in any kind of fast pace. If they are going to say something publicly, it's going to be slow and measured response. And it's going to take them as long as they want to take. Do you want to win here? Is there a way? Is there a way to win here?
What now?
Save the best for last.
There we go.
Job done.
I must choose.
And I guess I'm not really particularly happy with the idea that Manga Gamer might potentially get in trouble with Valve, but they really are. They're just not approaching it from a truthful perspective, and that backlash is gonna hurt. If they had said yes, this game does have anime girls in it, and they have a romantic interest, but there's nothing wrong with that, and we shouldn't be censored from that, and this is not how you said you were going to enforce that. This is not the policy you said you had. So if they had pointed out that Steam has been inconsistent and dishonest in their policy, then they would have been on the right side of history. But to compound a lie with a different lie doesn't make the problem go away. Meanwhile, I still see uncensored games. I still see adult games getting approved. Games that look like anime games. Usually they're bad games. But... And maybe this is just a case of Manga Gamer doesn't speak English, and so they're translating things wrong and having a miscommunication. But that is really generous thing to even speculate upon. And Manga Gamer certainly does seem like they are focused and interested in forcing people to buy their games directly from their website instead of from Steam. This very well may be our last game if I can burn through these last few games. We have one with a bunch of Asian characters called Journey to the World on Steam. It is a low effort looking RPG style game. Free to play, English not included, Chinese only. So yeah, nothing there.
Job done.
Let's see. TechRaptor has an article here. Fallout 76 Nuclear Winter pre-beta period has been extended. I can't really imagine why people... Oh wait, this is Fallout 76. I thought this was Fallout Shelter. Well, I really can't imagine why anybody would still be playing Fallout 76, but I can't imagine why people would still be playing the Fallout Shelter game either. That does seem kind of silly.
A stranger will offer you aid.
Your healing is doubled. Interesting. I don't think I'll ever be able to use that ability. Gamma Sutra has an article. The Oculus Quest saw 5 million in content sales in its first 2 weeks, which might be a big number. It might not. That's kind of ridiculous. I also heard that Facebook is getting into some kind of cryptocurrency, which sounds like an insane thing for Facebook to do. But whatever, I guess. They can do whatever they want to do, and they'll try and save their companies. But inevitable decline. This story is kind of jaw-dropping if it loads up. TechRaptor has an article here. Mortal Kombat 11's ranked mode is out tomorrow, so is Shang Tsung. Not surprising that they're trickling out more characters. It is rather surprising though that there was not a ranked online multiplayer or ranked mode, which I assume is an online multiplayer, until now. That pretty much guarantees that the entirety of Mortal Kombat 11 was not a finished product when it was released, and that's not an unsurprising guess, frankly. Let's see. Gamasutra has an article here on Niantic is suing Global Plus Plus over modified Pokemon Go and Ingress apps. Let's see. It's copyright infringement, breach of contract, and a handful of other violations for creating and releasing hacked versions of Niantic developed games like Pokemon Go and Ingress. Not surprising there. That being said, Ingress and Pokemon Go both have that thing where you have to leave your house, and I imagine that there is a decent number of people that don't want to leave their house, but want to still be in the loop. They have that fear of missing out, so they would play a hacked version. Don't get me wrong, I've thought about playing a hacked version of Destiny Child, the mobile game that I'm still somewhat obsessed about. They put out a new event like every 2 weeks or so, it's kind of impossible to lose interest in the game. It's also kind of impossible to ever catch up in the game and get all of the characters, because there are these limited time characters that if you don't collect them, don't feel like they're ever coming back. And they claim like they're never coming back. I think at some point they should come back, because otherwise you have to spend some real world money to get everything. And I'm definitely not willing to actually spend real world money on these things. But I'm also, because of that, missing out on some characters. So if I had a hacked version that had a lot of the in-app real world currency, and yet you could just get those elements without spending real world money, that would be something I would do, but I would also be afraid of potentially getting sued, because there has been at least a couple of lawsuits where people have used hacked apps to get things that could only be purchased, and then the company comes back and sues that person, saying we lost out on that suit, on those sales. And for Destiny Childs, thousands of dollars upon thousands of dollars can be purchased in any single event, it seems like. Let's go ahead and hit this.
Wanna blow something up?
Done.
Next game we have to consider is called Pond Wars, which looks like a low-effort clone of Gorillas, with the slight change that the water seems to move and create some physics there. However, in relative size of how big these boats are, these waves are so high that you're talking tsunami level waves, so there's a lack of relative scale. The concept of real-world water physics while two boats are shooting at each other is slightly interesting. It's also something that very possibly has been implemented in other games and people just didn't even mention it. Alright, let's do that. And then this. This. And then this.
What fools these mortals be!
Next we have a game on Steam here called Die Young Prologue. This is already mixed reviewed. But I'll put it on the fall list to give it a little bit more chance. This looks like it might be a game and not just a low effort asset flip game. That being said, it might be so early access, or since this is just a demo or prologue of something bigger, it's a little odd that the response is so negative. This is from Indigala too, which Indigala as a publisher. Let's see, what else have they published? Staying Alive, which isn't good, and Die Young itself, which is mostly positive.
What now?
This is an early access game for $19.99, and this came out June 5th, 2017. Alright, so you can kind of see what they're doing here is they've put out this single player version of the other game that never came out of early access, in an effort to so yeah, they're putting out Die Young Prologue, sorry, it took me too long to play there, as a way of trying to pivot a abandoned game, and so people are not happy about that. So unless they could make this really, really good, which I don't think they can, I don't think anybody's gonna get over that betrayal, which I think is about the right term. And it's such a backwards way of making a game. You shouldn't make the single player experience first and then go to multiplayer. Let's see.
You call that a weapon?
Shatter.
So I'm not going to put Die Young on the fall list. If it gets really, really good, then I'll hear about it again. I think we already talked about this, but Steam's latest update changes in-home streaming to remote play. Yeah, I'm fairly certain we talked about this. Check out there as that article. Basically, it means that you can now stream your games through any network if you've got the internet speed to do that. Which is, I think, a big if. Let's go ahead and kill this. So we play the card. Next we have a game on Steam here called Elpida Crónicas de una Guerrilla, which sounds like a Spanish JRPG game. There's nothing here of interest. English is not supported. It's discounted to $4.49. Portuguese Brazil is the language on it. And yeah, we kind of have a lot to do. Like, I still need to get one thing done. One of these two things done on the Asian account and the European account and the Americas account. But I'm out of news, and I think this is a great opportunity to take it easy and end the stream early. Leave people wanting. So we only have a little bit of other things to talk about. Like, Blizzard is trying to hire a mid/senior game designer. This, I don't know if this is for Hearthstone. Yeah, this is for Hearthstone. So they've basically need somebody to take over Hearthstone and be in charge of it, or at least work with the team that does that. Why did I have Gamatsu's Twitter feed open? I don't know. Also, it's worth mentioning that Twitch drops are returning for the Masters Tour in Las Vegas, which means between June 14th and 16th, if you're watching on Twitch for a certain amount of time, you will get rewarded with packs. So basically you have to just watch this, but you also have to I think connect your battle.net account to Twitch if you haven't done that. So yep, that's something to keep in mind when that happens, to get a few more free packs. And that puts me at the Humble Bundle store, and the Humble Bundle store, I bet, still doesn't have any, like, it really has no video game announcements or bundles. They have some manga, a manga bundle going on right now, which you just get the digital version. So, like, if I was going to get a manga, I don't think I'd want the digital versions until I had at least a one tier, one shelf of a bookshelf full of manga, which could happen pretty easily. You could easily take up 3 shelves with just the entire Dragon Ball collection, but there's certainly something to be said about having the physical copy instead of digital copies. And then eventually I probably would fall into digital copies and just say, give me the digital copy and I'll read it on my tablet. I'm now back on my Twitter feed looking to see if there's any bits of news worth mentioning, and there actually is only one thing even new in the hour and a half we've been streaming. TechRaptor has an article here: Amazon Game Studios struggling due to the Lumberyard engine. That's not super surprising. The Lumberyard engine is supposed to be based off the Cry engine, but apparently it's not doing that great of a job. I don't know if the Cry engine itself really works that well as a engine. It really is just a two-party system between Unity and Unreal, unless you're going to use your own internal engine. I think there is also something to be said about a lack of success of the Amazon warehouse services, AWS services, and their back-end network services alone. And Lumberyard is built to use that, I think. So yeah, we heard earlier that Amazon was laying off dozens of employees from their games division. So the two stories are almost certainly connected. Well, yeah. We're ending early. I would point out that had anybody jumped on the chat and distracted me and talked, I probably would go a little bit longer here. And I am going to have to finish my Lego, so I won't be immediately playing this, but I'll play this later tonight. But yeah, we're done with the stream. We're still in that post-E3 relax time. At some point, hopefully before the Wednesday, I'll get back to playing Doom 2016 and finish, probably not finish it, but start to play the second half of that game. That's it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.